The candles burn low tonight, their wax trembling like thoughts I cannot tame. This evening my heart whispers, and I, an echo of the past, must confess. Feel the weight of the quill in my hand, the scent of aged parchment in linseed oil, the hush of a Florentine studio cloaked in midnight. The walls carry the ghosts of my sketches, flying machines, dissected limbs, and faces that never looked back. If these confessions stir something quiet in you, return again, and whisper from where in time you listen. Now lie down, let the hush of invention settle over your breath. Inhale the musk of charcoal dust and dried paint. Let go. We will confess together for a world of forgotten dreams and trembling genius. The night wraps around the studio like a cloak stitched from shadows. The moonlight barely filters through the high, narrow windows, casting long threads of silver across my scattered scrolls. Somewhere beneath it all lies a sketch of wings, torn, water-stained, curling at the edges like a forgotten petal. I press my fingers against the parchment, and it gives a soft sigh. So much paper, so many lines, and yet so little flight. The quill in my hand moves without certainty. It hesitates, as though the feather itself is weary of promise. A sound echoes through the silence, not loud, no, the gentle scratch of ink meeting fibrous paper. That sound, my eternal companion. It once thrilled me. Now it sounds like breath drawn through clenched teeth. You see, silence was once my ally. In silence I heard the rotation of gears before they were built. I heard the tension in a model's shoulders before they moved. But now the silence echoes too loud, and not with discovery, but with all that I have left undone. There are scrolls I dare not unroll, the ones I tied too tightly, the ones stained not by time, but by my own disappointment. I was 30 years old when I first dreamed of the helical air screw, a machine that could twist itself into the sky. My fingers tingled when I sketched it, each spiral a defiance of gravity. I thought, the world will see it rise, my name will ascend with it. But it sits still in a drawer, not even a model, just a dream caught in ink. Why didn't I build it? Fear, or maybe doubt wearing fear's mask. I could tell you it was the Duke's shifting interests, the commissions for war machines, the endless interruptions of court. But I know better. I feared failure more than I desired success. Perhaps that is my most human flaw, the genius who feared the floor more than he craved the sky. A breeze slips through the window slit, and the candle sputters. The shadows move, and for a moment I see them, the faces of ideas unborn. A bridge of ropes that never crossed the river, a diving suit never worn, an automaton with the face of a lion whose heart never ticked. They look at me, not with anger, but with something softer, sadness maybe, or quiet blame. I remember the moment I first saw how muscles thread beneath skin. I was young, apprenticed, my eyes too wide for one lifetime. I pressed fingers to the arm of a model and imagined the strings inside, tendons pulling bones in choreographed motion. Later, I opened bodies to learn the truth. The flesh parted with terrible honesty. There was beauty there, even in death. I found patterns in decay. I found mathematics in veins. But what did I do with those truths? Bound them in a codex, locked them in mirrored script, hid them from a world that needed them. Do I regret that? Yes and no. I was born too early, or the world too late. Tonight, the scent of turpentine clings to the wooden floorboards. My boots creak as I shift. I rise and move to the far wall where canvases lean like old soldiers. Some unfinished, some only whispers in oil. I touch the edge of one, not the Mona Lisa. That one is hidden away, almost finished, almost eternal. This one is of a man with his head turned, the eyes never painted. I never knew what he was looking at. Perhaps that's why I stopped. Or perhaps it was because I was always chasing something else. Always chasing. Is that the curse of invention? That the thing you dream is never the thing you hold? I sit again. The chair groans. My hand resumes its arc, dragging black across beige. The quill bends ever so slightly. I dip it again, watching the ink bloom like thought. I should be satisfied. I have drawn machines that could raise battlements and drain marshes. I have painted angels with the eyes of women who never wept. I have studied flight, anatomy, geometry, the curl of hair in wind. But tonight, none of that weighs more than the empty page beside me. It calls to me, not with accusation, but with possibility. It says, you still breathe, therefore you can still begin. I chuckle softly. My voice startles me. It has been hours since I used it. Outside, a horse snorts. The city is never fully asleep. Florence, with its rivers and secrets. The bells of Santo Spirito toll midnight. I wonder who else sits awake at this hour. Perhaps Michelangelo, chiseling fury into marble. Or young Francesco, copying my notebooks, trying to learn what even I do not fully understand. Or perhaps no one. Perhaps I alone linger in this hour where day and night hesitate, as I hesitate. Is that not fitting? I, the master of hesitation. Even the Mona Lisa smiles with knowing. She smiles not because she is content, but because she understands what it means to begin and never finish. I wonder, truly, how many geniuses crumble not from lack of brilliance, but from the weight of endless inception. Somewhere below my feet, a mouse scratches in the wood. The sound is precise, soft. I envy its clarity of action. It does not draft blueprints. It does not calculate failure. It simply moves. I once said, art is never finished, only abandoned. But tonight, I amend it. Invention is not only the child of necessity, it is also the orphan of doubt. And so, I confess, I am Leonardo da Vinci, painter of ghostly smiles, engineer of paper dreams, and I have abandoned more wonders than I have built. But I still believe in them. I always will. The candle gives a final sputter, and for a moment the room is darker than ink. The sketches lie where I left them, half covered by vellum, dimmed by dust. Each curl of graphite a whisper of ambition. On this page, gears interlocking with precision, teeth sharp as thoughts once were. On the next, wings outstretched, delicate as the ribs of a bat, feathered in strokes that mimic nature's own rhythms. I remember the moment I conceived it, a flying machine so real in my mind I could feel the wind on my cheeks, lifting me from the rooftops of Florence. But the gears never turned, the wings never beat. They remain frozen in ink. I trace a finger along the rim of a circular gear, notched, perfect, untested, designed to convert human motion into lift, a marvel of leverage and intent. And yet, they are like prayers never spoken aloud, trapped, unheard. Why do I dwell on these failed machines? Because they were not failures of mechanics, they were failures of courage. You see, I loved the precision of design, but the chaos of real movement always eluded me. I could imagine every motion, simulate the weight of air on canvas, but to commit to building, to endure the shame of watching it crash before others, that is a humiliation I could not afford. Not in courts where I was already a curiosity, a man too scattered to be safe. I was hired to build weapons, not wonders, cannons, not wings. Death sells better than flight. There were times when I pretended otherwise, when I showed diagrams of gliders to Ludovico, the Duke of Milan, as if they were only diversions, amusements. And he smiled, distracted, his mind already turning toward fortresses and firepower. They called me the divine Leonardo, and I hated it.
For what is divinity when your creations remain caged in scrolls? Even now, I dream of the ornithopter. The frame was to be of willow, light but strong. The wings, silk stretched across ribs of pine. The pilot, lying prone, pumping pedals to drive motion. A dance with gravity, elegant and bold. I drew every part, I measured every angle. I whispered to myself, it will work, it must. But I never built it. Why? Perhaps because I feared that if it failed, I would lose the dream itself. It was safer to love its potential than to confront its imperfection. Tonight, in this still room, I confess, I feared the finality of failure more than I feared death. You may think me cowardly, perhaps I am, but I ask you this, how many among you have dared to bring your purest dream into a world that may tear it apart? Even the codex on the flight of birds, my proudest manuscript, sits half-finished. The calculations stop abruptly. The final page is blank, as if my hand betrayed me, as if the air itself turned and said, no. I remember a night not unlike this one, autumn, damp and cool. I walked along the Arno with paper tucked under my arm, eyes scanning the wings of swallows that darted above. Their motion impossible to diagram, so erratic, so alive. I stopped beside a bridge, pulled out my notes, and tried again to sketch the arc of a bird banking into the wind. But they moved too fast, too free. I could only capture fragments. My hands trembled with frustration. A passerby asked if I was ill. I nodded yes, though I meant something different. I was not sick of the body. I was sick of approximation. So I returned to my studio, where my gears and levers obeyed me, obedient on paper, mute in wood. Is that not the true sadness of invention? To make what should work, and know it never will? I sigh, and it fogs the glass of the oil lamp. The flame wavers. My mind drifts. To the tank. Ah, yes, the armored vehicle I designed for battle. A shell of rotating slats, bristling with cannon mouths. They loved that one. The Duke's men praised it as genius, but they never saw the flaw I buried within it. Intentional. A gear reversed. A mechanism that would bind under pressure. I sabotaged it. Yes, I, Leonardo, master of turning wheels, inserted a failure into my own invention. I feared what they would do with it, what man does with power when it moves too swiftly. And so the tank, too, remained a sketch, never built, never tested. Another gear that never turned, another intention never unspooled. I closed the notebook. There's a weight to dreams deferred. They don't vanish. They gather in corners, thick as cobwebs. You can ignore them by candlelight, but in silence they whisper. They say, "You could have tried. You still can." But time is a gear no mind can reverse. I walk to the window. Below, the city is asleep. I see rooftops, chimneys, the river gleaming like a vein in stone. I imagine flying above it all, the ornithopter catching wind, dipping and rising with the contours of breath and desire. I smile. A boy's dream, a genius's failure, both mine. I return to the table, pick up the quill. Ink clings to its tip, dark and full. It waits, and perhaps, just perhaps, I will redraw the wing again, one last time, and let the gears turn in thought, if not in air. There is a stain on the wooden board where I mix my oils, dark, persistent, older than any canvas in this room. It is linseed oil, yes, but more than that, it is memory. You see, each pigment I used carried stories. Ochres from Sienna, lapis from beyond the sea, red made from cochineal beetles crushed beneath stone. These colors were not merely tones, they were sacrifices. And sometimes, as I dipped the brush, the studio did not smell of paint. It smelled of the battlefield. I did not want to build machines for war. But they asked. They always ask. Power demands shapes. Power demands symbols. Power demands tools, and I, in my youth, eager to prove worth to patrons with gold and armies, gave them blueprints with curved blades and impossible reach. I told myself it was only design, that drawing a scythe on wheels did not make me a harvester of death. But even ink has weight. Even dreams have shadows. I remember vividly the night I presented my war chariot to Ludovico Sforza. It was winter. My fingers were stained with charcoal and hope. The design was elegant. Spiked wheels, armor-plated sides, rotating crossbows on a central axis. It turned like a predator in the sketch. He was pleased. He said it could change the tide of any siege. I nodded. I smiled. But inside, something broke. I had made beauty into threat. I had shaped art into fear. He asked when it could be built. I told him soon. But I delayed. I adjusted gears. I inserted calculations that did not resolve. I used the tools of brilliance to protect my soul from its own sharpness. Still, the smell of war lingered. I could not escape it. Even in my anatomy studies, those silent dissections by candlelight, I saw echoes of battle. The cut of muscle reminded me of torn fabric on a soldier's sleeve. The bone beneath reminded me of splintered weapons, of broken lances. The body is a battlefield, after all. Each pulse a charge, each breath a retreat. I once held the heart of a dead man in my hands. It was smaller than I imagined. I pressed it gently, watching how it curled in upon itself. And I wondered, is this where hatred begins? Is this where mercy dies? They say I was cold in those moments, that I observed without emotion. But they are wrong. I wept, quietly, afterward. Not because he had died, he was old, he was at peace, but because I could not put him back together. I could diagram the valves, I could explain the chambers, but I could not restore the music. Art can imitate. It cannot resurrect. I turned again to machines. And what did I build? A water wheel, a dredge, a hydraulic saw. They were safe, they were useful, they would not kill. But even these, even the peaceful ones, were not free from the architecture of force. Everything spins, everything cuts. The world, I've learned, is a dance of friction and release. And I am caught between. A man asked me once, "Leonardo, do you prefer brush or compass?" I answered, "They are the same." He laughed. He thought I meant they both draw, but I meant something deeper. They both divide. They both wound. A line is a choice, a cut in possibility. With my compass, I could design a fortress that would never fall. With my brush, I could paint a face no one would forget. But I could not heal. Not really. I sit now before a drawing of a bridge, elegant, curved, strong, designed to be built swiftly over rivers using only pressure and balance. It was meant to bring armies across faster, but I always hoped it would carry lovers, that peasants might cross it to meet family, that pilgrims might pass beneath its graceful arch and look up in wonder. They never built it. The Sultan of Istanbul rejected the idea, said it could not hold, that it was too beautiful to be true. Too beautiful to be true. I have heard that said about my paintings too, that the Mona Lisa's smile is unnatural, that the Last Supper's shadows fall wrong, that St. John's gesture is too soft for a prophet. But truth, my friend, wears many faces. Even war can look like peace if painted in gold. I close my eyes. The scent of burnt oil returns, memory, not reality. I hear the sounds of battle imagined, gears grinding, wheels turning, voices crying for something beyond reason. And beneath it all, the scratch of a quill. Still writing, still dreaming, still trying. I pick up a small sculpture from the shelf, a clay model of a soldier, unfinished. He has no face. I never gave him one. Perhaps I was afraid of what I'd see. A reflection? A stranger? A man who built catapults and wept in secret? I set it down gently. No one will remember these machines, not the failed ones, not the ones I hid. But maybe that's for the best. Let them remember the smile, not the spike, the hand raised in blessing, not the arm behind the bow. Let them dream I was only an artist. It's easier that way. But you, listening now, you will know that I held both ink and blood, and I chose again and again to draw the wound instead of inflicting it. In the lower chamber beneath the studio, where the air remains still and tile seems to pool like water in corners, there rests a table stained with the quiet truth of flesh. The candles here are never tall. They burn low, sputtering with restraint, as if reluctant to shine too brightly on what I once laid before them. I remember each descent into this vault, carrying not brushes nor blueprints, but linen wraps and a silence heavier than guilt. It was not morbid curiosity that led me to the cadavers. It was hunger, not of the stomach, but of the mind. A compulsion that tugged at my hand when I tried to paint a neck or sketch a smile. I needed to know what lay beneath. Not simply bones or muscles, but the hidden scaffolding of expression, movement, sorrow, the maps under the skin. The first body I examined was an old man. A hospital had taken pity on my requests, or perhaps saw the advantage of science over superstition. He had died quietly, I was told, in his sleep, with a faint smile still on his lips. I like to believe he dreamed of gardens or music as his heart slowed. When I unwrapped him, I whispered a prayer, not to God perhaps, but to the mystery of life itself. What struck me first was not decay, but stillness. There is a kind of dignity in the dead. They do not tremble, they do not lie. They allow you to learn without complaint, though your fingers offend what once was sacred. I made over 30 dissections in my life. Men, women, even infants, when allowed. I documented every layer, the sinews of the hand, the curves of the rib cage, the coiling of intestines like calligraphy written in meat. My notebooks grew heavy with these truths, but no matter how deep I carved, the soul eluded me. Where was it? Was it in the eyes, now glazed? In the tongue, now silent? In the chest cavity, where I measured the heart but found no echo? I feared sometimes that I was drawing only emptiness, that the spark which made a man love, or lie, or paint, was not something one could render in charcoal. It flickered away at the moment of death, leaving only scaffolding. And yet I learned more in that silence than from 1,000 sermons. I discovered how the diaphragm lifts the breath, how the fingers dance because of hidden pulleys within the wrist, how the brain curves like a curled fist above the spine, tender, complex, arrogant. I realized something unsettling. Nature is the finest architect. Every body is a masterpiece, unique, irreproducible. My machines, though clever, pale beside the elegance of a knee joint or the lacing of blood vessels in a hand. And yet, for all my awe, I could never show the world. I wrote backwards in mirrored script, not just to deter idle eyes, but to hide my fears. My sketches were not blasphemy, they were reverence. But I knew the church would not agree. They feared the unwrapped body, the revealed mechanism. They clung to mystery and called it sacred. I sought knowledge and called it light. So I studied in secret. Sometimes by lantern, sometimes in breath held so long it burned. I cleaned wounds with wine and sewed flesh back together after I had finished, not out of necessity, but out of respect. In those quiet nights, I wondered, did others feel what I felt? That we are but machines of feeling, held together by fragile glue? That within every sorrow is a nerve, a signal, a pressure point? I did not believe this meant we were less.
Only that we were more miraculous. Once I tried to explain this to a young apprentice. I told him, the soul is not separate from the body. It is the way the body moves when it believes it is unseen. He did not understand. He was frightened. He left soon after. Perhaps I said too much. Perhaps I had learned too much. But what was I to do with all this knowing? I painted. That was my answer. In St. Jerome in the wilderness, I traced the taut cords in his neck from a man I had studied who died gripping his final breath. In the Last Supper, the way Judas leans away from the table, his arm half raised in defense, that gesture came from a woman who had died reaching for her child. I borrowed death to better capture life. It was not cruelty, it was alchemy. Still, I sometimes wake with the memory of weight beneath my hands, the heaviness of limbs that will never again stretch toward sky or brush. I feel guilt, yes, but not regret. For in those moments, I was not dissecting bodies, I was confessing my own ignorance. And ignorance, unchallenged, is the true profanity. Tonight, I opened a codex I had not touched in years. It contains the drawings of a fetus in the womb, curled, perfect, waiting. I remember how still I sat as I drew it, not because of fear, but of awe. There, in miniature, the whole of us, the first architecture, the blueprint before the blueprint. How strange that I, a man fascinated by the future, found his greatest truth in the beginning of life. And yet I did not know how to share it. The drawings remain in shadow. I wonder if one day they will surface. If another will read my notes and understand that I did not seek to desecrate the body, I sought to honor it. I close the codex slowly. The candle beside me has burned low. Its wax clings like skin to the base. I whisper to the shadows. I did not find the soul, but I found the places where it might hide. And perhaps that is enough.
He hangs on the far wall, pinned like memory between paper and possibility. The Vitruvian Man, my supposed triumph. Arms outstretched within the circle and square, his limbs a geometry of balance, a diagram of perfection. They say it is my greatest drawing. I say it is my most misunderstood. He stares back at me with no eyes, no pupils, just the suggestion of a face, as if humanity itself had paused halfway through creation. But I know that look. It is not serenity. It is interrogation. What did I intend when I drew him? I remember the moment well. Venice was behind me, the stink of canals traded for the silence of countryside. I had been reading Vitruvius, the Roman architect who believed the human body to be the perfect measure of all things. That day I did not eat. I sketched for hours, burning with a fever, not of illness, but of revelation. The circle, infinite, divine. The square, rational, grounded. And within them, the man, suspended. I thought I had captured something profound, that the human body is a bridge between heaven and earth, that our proportions speak the language of the cosmos. But tonight I look at him again, and all I see is stillness. He does not walk, he does not reach, he remains trapped between shapes of my own design. Was that my sin? To imprison the infinite in lines? He was supposed to be the answer, to show that we, humans, contain order, that amidst our chaos there is symmetry, reason, purpose. But life has never obeyed that clarity. It spills, it distorts, it resists. No one ever stands with such poise, arms open, legs apart, naked in ideal form. Not in real life, not even in dreams. I tried to make the body into mathematics. And now it judges me for it. I move closer. The paper has yellowed, yes, but the lines remain bold. Ink made of gallnut and iron. It has aged well, perhaps better than I. His torso rises in two positions, his legs split like a compass. He hovers between movement and paralysis, symmetrical, eternal. But there is no breath in him. That I could not draw. I touch the edge of the parchment carefully so as not to smudge the past, and I wonder, was I chasing perfection or fleeing imperfection? I have always feared error. Not the little ones, not a shaky line or smudged edge, but the fundamental ones. The ones that reveal you misunderstood the whole of something, that you built the wrong gear, painted the wrong face, loved the wrong truth. Perfection is a mirror I built to avoid seeing myself. And yet, he is beautiful. That cannot be denied. Even as he rebukes me, the Vitruvian Man holds something eternal. He reminds me that we are shaped by patterns, that there is design in our chaos, even if we do not understand it. The day I finished him, I walked to the window and saw a child spinning in a field, arms wide, hair flying, feet skipping in imperfect rhythm. And I thought, there he is, the real Vitruvian, alive, moving, glorious in imbalance. I tried to sketch him later, but I couldn't. Movement resists lines. I have always struggled with that, capturing the living. I can paint the appearance of life, the fold of a cloak in motion, the glimmer of an eye, the hint of a smile. But to paint the thing itself, the breath between, that is beyond me. That is beyond all of us. Still, I return to the drawing night after night. I light a candle before it as others do before altars. I sit in the hush and listen. He says nothing, but his silence is full. He reminds me, you are not a god. You are not the measure of man. You are merely a man measuring. And that, I think, is enough. There is comfort in the limits of my reach. I once tried to build a perfect room, mathematically ideal, acoustically flawless, a circle within a square, like him, like the drawing. I wanted to speak within it and hear no echo. I wanted to feel the silence wrap me like cloth. It didn't work.
There is always an echo, even in silence. Even now, I hear mine in the turning of pages, in the distant creak of the rafters, in the gentle groan of my chair as I sit again. My body is not symmetrical. My joints ache. My left shoulder hunches more than the right. I am not the Vitruvian man. But perhaps that is the lesson. We chase symmetry, knowing we are asymmetrical. We draw circles, knowing we walk crooked paths. I dip my pen again. Ink pools on the tip like thought unspoken. I begin another letter, to whom I do not know. Perhaps to the future, perhaps to no one. I write, to be human is to reach for shapes we will never become. But still we reach, and perhaps in that reaching we become worthy of the attempt. Outside a wind stirs, the shutters rattle softly. He watches me still, and I finally understand. He was never meant to be me. He was never meant to be real. He is the dream of balance, the dream of unity. And dreams, after all, are the only blueprints worth keeping. The parchment bears the faint scent of dust and dried ink. Its surface, uneven and yellowed by time, seems to absorb more than words. It drinks intention, hesitation, fragments of longing I can never quite name. My quill moves, but I do not know for whom. These letters are not addressed. No names, no destinations. Only the compulsion to confess, to explain, to capture some fragile filament of thought before it escapes into silence. I've written thousands. Folded, stacked, bound in leather, some never opened again. Others I've burned. They were not meant for eyes, perhaps not even mine. What is it in a man that makes him write without a reader? Perhaps it is vanity, or perhaps it is loneliness. You see, when I write, I imagine time unraveling, not in days or years, but in hands. Gentle, unfamiliar hands lifting these pages long after I've turned to dust. Perhaps a scholar, perhaps a curious child,
Perhaps someone with questions I never answered for myself.
Will they understand the mirror writing? Will they see the sadness beneath the cleverness? Will they hear my voice buried in the script like breath trapped beneath glass? I hope they do, but I do not count on it. Even in life, my letters were often unanswered. I wrote to men of power, dukes, kings, popes, offering my services, listing my talents like wares in a marketplace. I promised wonders, bridges that built themselves, machines that could walk, weapons of precision, shows of theater that could make stars fall. Sometimes they replied, often they did not, and so I wrote again, always again. One of my earliest letters still haunts me. I was barely more than a boy, hungry, uncertain, desperate to be seen. I wrote to Ludovico Sforza with confidence I did not feel, claiming mastery of military engineering, hydraulics, architecture, sculpture, and painting. I boasted of war machines and siege tactics. I mentioned painting only as an afterthought. And yet, it was for painting that he remembered me. Irony is the ink in which time writes its revisions. That letter, so bold, so performative, became the key to my ascent. But I reread it now and see a mask. Every sentence a mirror held up to my fear of irrelevance. I am older now, my words less certain, my tone less triumphant. These days I do not write to impress. I write to remain. Tonight I penned a line that made me pause. Genius is not the fire, but the ash it leaves behind. I stared at the words as if they'd been written by someone else, someone wiser, someone resigned. I do not know if I believe it, but I feel it. There are so many things I wish I had written more plainly, so many thoughts lost in flourishes and footnotes. I used to think clarity was vulgar. Now I crave it. Not simplicity of idea, but simplicity of purpose. I want the page to hold what I meant, not what I feared someone might misunderstand. But it's too late to rewrite it all. The codices grow heavy in their bindings. Some are stored in drawers, others hidden in chests. I imagine them being found one day, opened like tombs, their diagrams fluttering in the breeze of discovery. Will those future readers know what they hold? Will they laugh at my errors? Will they marvel at the accuracy of what I only guessed? More importantly, will they feel me? Because that is all I have left to offer. Not the machines, not the paintings, not the notebooks filled with mirrored script, but this trembling voice laid bare between the lines. Once, while in Milan, I wrote a letter to myself. Yes, to myself. It was brief. Quote, "Leonardo, if you do not leave the house today, the world will not notice. But if you do, it still might not. Go anyway." I keep it folded in my sketchbook, a reminder, a comfort, a wound. The truth is, I have always needed permission to exist. From patrons, from history, from the silence that presses down when my quill stalls mid-sentence. These letters, these hundreds of unsent offerings, are not petitions. They are affirmations of life, of thought, of longing to be more than a name etched on a tomb. And sometimes they are questions. Quote, "Does the mind age faster than the body? Why does invention taste sweeter in the imagining than in the making? Am I remembered already or forgotten in advance?" No one answers, of course not, but I write them anyway. A letter, after all, is a conversation with the future.
And though the future does not write back, it listens, quietly, patiently, with eyes we'll never see. There is a draft I never sent to Michelangelo. I wrote it during the height of our silent rivalry. I praised his David. I confessed admiration, tinged with envy. I told him he carved with rage, while I painted with restraint, and that perhaps both were forms of prayer. I folded it, sealed it, and placed it behind a drawer. He never read it. Perhaps it is better that way.
Words can mend, but they can also expose, and I was never good at undressing pride. Still, the letter remains, like a ship in a bottle, sealed, floating in time, waiting for a tide that will never come. Tonight, I pick up the quill again. Not for a patron, not for a friend, not even for myself, but for the unknown, for the echo. I write, "To the one who reads this, know that I tried, not always wisely, not always well, but always with wonder." I place the sheet atop the others. The candlelight flickers. The words wait, not for a reply, but for someone to believe that they mattered. The gears gleam under dust. Brass teeth, oiled once with care, now catch light like forgotten relics, memories made solid, frozen in incomplete motion. They rest in a wooden box, tucked beneath a folded cloth I use to polish lenses. I open the lid and stare at them the way one might study bones of a creature long extinct. I had hoped to build a machine that would remember what I could not. A clock that did not tell time but captured thoughts. A cabinet of rotating drums, each imprinted with symbols, not letters, but impressions, shapes, lines of movement. I called it the Macchina della Memoria, the machine of memory. It never worked. I tried so many forms. I drew cylinders with pegs that triggered levers. I imagined ink flowing through tubes, marking parchment in response to breath or pressure. I built wooden arms that spun like prayers whispered too fast to hear. I believed truly that thought could be recorded mechanically, that the architecture of reflection could be etched in gear and chord. But the machine resisted me, or perhaps it obeyed too well, because memory, I now know, is not mechanical. It is fragile, incomplete, disobedient. You try to grasp it, and it changes. You chase it, and it retreats, like trying to draw smoke. And yet I was obsessed, perhaps because my own memory is treacherous. There are days when I forget the names of my own designs. I look at sketches and wonder, did I make this? When? A winged device scrawled in a margin, a formula I cannot reconstruct, whole pages I cannot recall drafting. My mind, so full once, now loses pieces like a garden loses petals in wind. And so I thought, if I can build a machine to remember, to store, then I need not fear forgetting. I need not fear vanishing. But it was a child's hope. The mind, so full once, now loses pieces like a garden loses petals in wind. And so I thought, if I can build a machine to remember, to store, then I need not fear forgetting. I need not fear vanishing. But it was a child's hope. The mind is not a machine. It does not run on oil and order. It stutters, it loops, it hides what wounds it cannot heal. Some of my inventions remain intact. I see them when I visit old patrons. A pump, still used in vineyards. A crank-driven hoist in a grain mill.
a design for a rotating stage used once, long ago, in a palace performance. None of them bear my name, and none remember me. That is the inventor's curse. The work outlives the hand, but the signature fades. And I was so afraid of vanishing. I filled thousands of pages. I wrote in mirrors. I cross-referenced, annotated, diagrammed. I imagined that by making everything visible, I could preserve myself. But now I understand. No machine, no scroll, no monument can hold the shape of a man's soul. Only another mind can do that. And even then, only briefly. I once designed a memory palace, not in wood nor stone, but in imagination. Each hallway led to a thought. Each door opened to a moment. I practiced walking through it in my mind, recalling every room. I placed childhood memories in the upper gallery. My mother's hands, soft, distant. The scent of the river near my first workshop. The way sunlight hit the marble steps of Verrocchio's studio. But I don't visit that palace anymore. It is overgrown. Locked, perhaps. I do not know if I lost the key, or if I chose to leave. There is a sadness in letting go of memory, not just because of what is lost, but because of what it takes with it, the self that remembered. What remains? Tonight, I hold a gear no larger than my palm, precision cut, beautiful, useless. It was meant for a mechanical lion, a gift for the King of France. The lion was to walk forward, bow, and open its chest to reveal a bouquet of lilies. I finished the sketch. I even built the frame. But it never bowed. The lion never moved. Instead, it rests beneath a cloth like a sleeping myth. I wonder, will they remember that I tried? Will they know how hard it is to invent? It is not the drawing, that is the easy part. The real work is wrestling possibility into obedience. It is failing with dignity. It is letting go of the beautiful thing in your mind when the real world will not accept it. It is mourning ideas as if they were children. And still, I would not trade it. I would not erase the gears, the ink-stained hands, the hours spent in wild thought. Even if the world forgets me, even if the machine never speaks. Because invention is not memory. It is desire. It is hope wearing copper and wood. I rise from my chair and walk to the far shelf. There sits a box sealed with iron clasps. Inside are all the failed parts, the broken prototypes, the bent levers, the torn sketches. I open it and stare inside. It is not disappointment I feel. It is tenderness. They tried these pieces. They carried dreams too heavy for them, and they deserve to rest. I close the box slowly. Then I sit again. I pick up the quill. Not to record, not to explain, but simply to remember. Because perhaps memory cannot be built, but it can be honored. They say we were rivals. Leonardo and Michelangelo, the two titans of Florence, waging war not with swords, but with marble and paint. They tell stories of our quarrels, our cutting words, our disdain smoothed with civility. But tonight, in the stillness of this room, where only the quill and the flame know my true heart, I must confess, he was never my greatest rival. I was. It is a strange thing to war against oneself, to admire your own hand while doubting the mind that guides it, to craft beauty and then ask, is this enough? To witness applause and feel only the silence afterward. That was always my battlefield. Not the Piazza della Signoria, where the crowds gathered around his David. Not the halls of the Signoria Palace, where I left my wall unfinished. But here, in the chambers of my own uncertainty. I have stood before the David, tall, defiant, perfect in defiance. I did not feel anger. I felt exposed. That marble man, with his gaze set in eternal challenge, mirrored my own doubts. I had drawn countless figures, yet none that commanded space the way his statue does. Michelangelo carved as if to wound the stone into truth. I, on the other hand, coaxed form gently, with shadows, with breath, with ambiguity. He sculpted finality. I painted uncertainty. And yet we are remembered side by side, two halves of a conversation that history has turned into combat. They compare us, they always will. But comparison is the language of others. Within me, the rivalry was more personal, a tug of war between invention and completion, between ambition and fear, between what I imagined and what I dared bring into being. You see, I have left too much unfinished. The Battle of Anghiari, grand, violent, magnificent in theory. The sketches were praised, the composition admired, the movement studied for generations. But the wall remains bare. I abandoned it, not because I lacked skill, but because I lost patience. The pigments did not hold, the plaster resisted me. My vision blurred with failure. I told myself I would return. I never did. Michelangelo would have fought the wall until it yielded. I turned away. That is who I am. And so I return to the echoing footsteps of my own indecision. People think genius is loud, that it shines like a star, blinding and bold. But mine has always been quiet, doubtful, full of detours. I have built bridges no one crossed, machines no one used, painted faces no one understood. Even La Gionca, the Mona Lisa, remains a mystery I cannot explain. They ask about her smile, and I say nothing, because I do not know what she hides, only that I too was hiding when I painted her, hiding from the fact that I could not finish anything, hiding from the fear that I had already peaked. There were moments, brief, breathless, when I felt I had touched the divine. A brushstroke on the Virgin's veil, a curve of a flying machine's wing, the glint of a hand extending from darkness into light. But they passed quickly, like birds in dusk, and then the voice would return. It is not enough. And the rival within would whisper, do more. Never, well done. Never, rest. Michelangelo never needed rest. I envied him, not for his fame or talent, but for his conviction, his sense of finality. He carved the Pietà as if he could chisel the divine into submission. I could not. I painted in layers, in glazes, in questions. Perhaps that is why my work survives in fragments, drawings, notebooks, beginnings. His stands in squares and churches, fixed and whole. Yet, for all this, I never hated him. I feared him, yes. I resented the ease with which people loved his fury. But I knew, in secret, that he suffered too. You do not create from fire without burning something inside. We never embraced, we never reconciled. But in the silence of my final years, I find myself speaking to him, in thought, in memory. You were my mirror, I say, and perhaps he says the same. But it was never him I needed to conquer. It was the boy from Vinci who drew birds in margins, who stared at rivers and asked how they remembered their shape. It was the apprentice who learned to mix paints before understanding why he wanted to. It was the man who stood before kings and felt smaller than his own sketches. He is the one I've tried to outdo.
And he is the one who remains, still asking, why not more? Still pointing to unfinished pages, still whispering, do not sleep yet. But I am tired, not with bitterness, with fullness. There is a peace that comes when you stop comparing, when you see your work not as a battle won or lost, but as footprints, crooked, unsure, in the soft soil of time. Michelangelo carved his name into marble. I left mine in dust. But both, I think, are ways of being remembered. And in the end, it was never about victory. It was about truth. And my truth is this: I am not a rival. I am a witness to the movement of thought, to the stillness of doubt, to the beauty of trying, even when it fails. She rests quietly in the corner of the studio, veiled in linen, as if sleep had claimed her too. The painting, my most studied, most misunderstood, watches even through the fabric. I feel her presence even when I do not face her, as if her gaze, once captured, never looks away. They call her the Mona Lisa, La Gioconda, Lisa del Giocondo perhaps, but names have always felt inadequate. To me, she is simply the smile, that impossible smile, the one that hovered in my mind before it ever hovered on canvas. When I began the portrait, it was a commission, simple, unremarkable, a merchant's wife, seated with composure to be painted with grace. But as my brush moved, something in her expression began to elude me. No matter how finely I layered pigment, how gently I coaxed the shadows to settle on her lips, the result was never exact. She smiled, not with joy nor mockery, but with secrecy. It unsettled me, still does. It is not her eyes that haunt me, though others insist it is so. It is her mouth, that soft, ambiguous curve that refuses to settle. Each day I returned to it. Each evening I stepped away, only to find that it had changed while I looked elsewhere. I painted her for years, far beyond the commission. I carried her with me, unfinished, from Florence to Milan, to Rome, and then to France. She aged as I aged, not on canvas, but in my mind. Why could I not complete her? Because she knew something I did not. She knows still. That's why she smiles. I tried again and again to trace the exact movement of her expression. I studied anatomy. I dissected muscles around the mouth. I mapped the delicate interplay of orbicularis and zygomaticus. I even observed actors and courtesans, hoping to glimpse that same elusive balance between amusement and stillness. But none matched her, because hers is not a muscle's work. It is memory, a reflection of something I once felt or hoped to feel. I no longer know which. Perhaps that's why I never gave her a background with clarity. The landscape behind her shifts like dream terrain, winding rivers, distant bridges, mountains that do not obey geography. It is not a place you can visit. It is a map of the internal, hers, mine, perhaps ours. She sits not in space, but in thought. And in that, she becomes not a woman, but a mirror. When others speak of her, they ask, who was she? But the real question is, who were they when they looked at her? Some see serenity, some seduction, others melancholy. All are true, none are complete, because she is not an answer. She is a question we are not meant to resolve. And still, she smiles. Even now, after all these years, I hesitate to sign her. It would feel like closure, and she is not closed. She breathes, somehow. I have painted angels, Madonnas, battles, saints, even my own strange inventions. But none speak as she does. Her silence is louder than all of them, and her gaze, oh, her gaze, it does not follow you as some believe. It precedes you. She sees before you look. She knows your posture before you settle. She invites, not with warmth, but with understanding. I once dreamed she spoke, not aloud, but in gesture.
She turned slightly, not just her head, but her entire being, and said with her stillness, "You have always been searching for me, Leonardo, but I was never lost." And I wept in that dream. Because she was right. I was not painting a woman. I was painting a wound, the kind that never fully closes, the kind that teaches you to smile through it. People will continue to debate her. They will use lenses and algorithms, scan layers of varnish and pigment, hoping to find what lies beneath. They will search for fingerprints, lost sketches, hidden meanings. Let them. They are not wrong to search, but they are wrong to expect discovery. She was never made to be understood. She was made to be felt, as I did for so many years, alone in the studio, the brush trembling at her cheek, my breath caught in a moment of doubt and awe. She never blinked. She never aged. She never forgave. And yet I loved her, not as a man loves a muse, but as a creator loves the one creation that outgrew him. She is better than me, more enduring, more complete. And I remain her painter, yes, but also her pupil. Because from her I learned the truth I never wrote. Art does not explain, it listens. And hers is the silence I return to when I have no more words. I rise now, slowly, and walk to her. The linen veil rests light as breath. I lift it. Her face emerges in warm shadow. The candle's flicker makes her mouth quiver, and for a moment I feel as though she is about to speak. But she doesn't need to. She has said everything, and I have only just begun to understand. The brushes lie still tonight. Their bristles, once pliant with oil and intent, now stand splayed and brittle, fossilized with pigment that never found a canvas. Some are worn to the nub, others remain nearly untouched, as if awaiting a commission that never came. I run my fingertips over them gently, as one might over the keys of a silent harpsichord. Each is a memory. Each carries a whisper. I used to prepare them with devotion. The grinding of pigment, the slow mixing with linseed oil, it was ritual, not task. Vermilion, umber, lead white, azurite, the names alone felt like incantations. I would crush stones into dust and conjure skies. I would blend charcoal and chalk to render a prophet's sigh. Every stroke a breath, every line a heartbeat. But tonight, my hand hesitates. Not from age, though age now visits my joints like a guest who never leaves, but from something deeper. from reverence, perhaps, or mourning, for all that was never painted. So many visions linger still in the hallways of my mind, altarpieces never begun, a Madonna with eyes that close in contemplation, a Saint Anthony adrift in swirling gold, half submerged in doubt, a map of heaven drawn in vanishing ink. They haunt me, these unborn images, more than the unfinished works, because at least those had the dignity of a beginning. What do we call the ideas we never dare to start? They are not failures. They are not losses. They are the silent kin of fear. And I, for all my acclaim, knew fear well. It wore many masks: distraction, commission, fatigue, but it always whispered the same question: what if it is not enough? What if the next brushstroke ruins the balance? What if the perfection in my mind cannot be translated? What if I finish it and it is forgotten? So many times I chose stillness over imperfection. I chose hesitation over release. And now, in the hush of this studio, the brushes bear witness to that choice. They whisper of colors that were never mixed, of canvases that stayed bare, of glazes that never caught the light. Yet I am not ashamed, not anymore, because in those pauses, in that restraint, there was honesty. I never wanted to paint merely to complete. I painted to reach, to feel, to hear something from beyond the form. Sometimes the hand paints what the soul does not yet understand. And sometimes the soul must wait for the hand to catch up. Tonight, I open a box of pigments untouched in years. The smell rushes out like old music, sharp, mineral, slightly bitter. I stir the powders gently with a bone-handled spoon. The ochre glints. The lapis shimmers faintly in the lamplight. I could paint again, even now, even like this. But I do not, because the canvas I truly face is not cloth. It is time, and time is harder to stretch. I close the box, return the brushes to their place, not as tools, but as relics. Instruments of a devotion that never truly ceased, only shifted. I hear wind through the window, a gentle, lonesome moan, like breath across a mouth that no longer speaks, like the sigh of a thought unfinished. And I think of her again, La Gioconda, her smile still hidden beneath its veil. I think of the winged designs sleeping in codices, of the anatomical sketches that will never find a surgeon's eyes. I think of my first brush, gifted to me by Verrocchio, stiff, clumsy, loved like a secret. What remains? Not just works, not just pages, but touch. The touch of brush to canvas, of pigment to air, of silence to thought. In the end, that's all art is, a caress of meaning, brief, delicate, reaching across darkness, hoping for a hand on the other side. I sit again, quill in hand, no longer trembling, only listening, because sometimes the brushes are dry, not from neglect, but because they have spoken all they needed to, and the rest is silence. It sits in the center of my work table, humble in form, ambitious in soul. The aerial screw, drawn and redrawn across the span of years, like a prayer I never stopped whispering, a spiral of linen and reed, designed to twist against air like an auger in wood. My first true attempt at flight, my most enduring failure. I remember the moment of its conception. I had watched sycamore seeds fall, spiraling gently in their descent, hovering with grace before touching the earth. And I wondered, if descent could be so measured, could ascent be reversed with equal elegance? I sketched it in haste, lines racing across parchment like wings desperate to lift. A cylinder, a man inside, pedals below. The spiral, broad at the base, tapering toward heaven, a corkscrew into the sky. It would never have flown. Not with the materials of my time, not with the weight of man and gravity's grip. But I didn't care. I believed in the motion more than the result. The spiral, that was the miracle. Not ascent, but the yearning to ascend. It is the shape of thought itself, turning, circling, climbing over itself, never resting. The spiral lives in the cochlea of the ear, in the shell of the snail, in galaxies. It is not a path. It is a rhythm, an invitation to rise even when there is no promise of flight. I built a model once, small and light, hung it from a thread and turned it gently. It spun like a dream catching breath. My assistants laughed. They said it looked like a child's toy. I smiled, though inside I burned, because they didn't see what I saw. Not a machine, but a philosophy. Everything moves in spirals. Desire, regret, memory, all of it curves back on itself. We begin at the center and are pulled outward only to return again and again to what we thought we left behind. That is why the screw still matters, even grounded, even broken, because in it is the shape of becoming. The scrolls I filled with its diagrams now rest beside me. Some pages are torn, others faded. A few bear smudges of oil, blood, or tears. I do not recall. I pick one up now and trace the spiral with my fingertip. The ink has held, better than my flesh, better than my certainty. I sometimes imagine a time when someone, a dreamer, an inventor yet to be born, lifts this drawing and understands what I meant. Not the dimensions, not the physics, but the hope behind the lines, the trembling wish that man might look at the birds and no longer envy, but imitate. They may build it one day. They may fly, not because my machine was perfect, but because I dared to draw it. That is what invention is, a letter to the future, signed in symbols, sealed in faith. I have written many such letters. Most were never sent. But this one, this spiral, I think it will reach them. Even if they do not know my name. Even if they never say Leonardo. Even if all that remains is a drawing, yellowed and tucked in the corner of a museum, behind glass, misattributed, misread, it will still turn. In some mind, in some eye, in some breath. Because motion never dies. I walk now to the window. The night presses against the glass like a question. Clouds move slowly across the moon, curling like thoughts unspoken. The spiral is there too, in the winds, in the tide of stars, in the bend of time itself. I whisper to it, "You never rose, but you lifted me." My hand, now less steady, returns to the table. I pick up the model again. It creaks faintly, as if remembering its promise. I hold it to the candlelight. The flame catches in the spiral's curves, and for a moment, just a moment, it glows. Like possibility, like a thought about to take flight. I set it down with reverence. The helix did not fly, but my mind did, and perhaps that is enough. The candle gutters low now, its flame leaning as if tired. Around me the studio sleeps. The scrolls no longer whisper. The gears no longer shine. The brushes rest in their trays like bones in reverent arrangement. And I sit with parchment once more beneath my hand, though the ink dries faster than it once did, and my fingers obey me less. What remains? A room of relics, or a cathedral of thought? I'm unsure. What I do know is that the pages I have filled, some carefully, others in frenzy, hold more of me than any portrait.
They carry my weight in lines, not likeness, not the shape of my nose or the angle of my jaw, but the slant of doubt in my letters, the hesitation in each mirrored word, the wonder I could never quite trap. Tonight, I ran my fingers over the earliest of my notebooks. The paper, brittle as dry leaves, curled at the edges, is covered in script I can barely read, my own, yet distant. I found a note from when I was barely 20. To discover the true nature of things, observe what they do in silence. How strange that after all this time, silence is where I now return, not as an observer, but as the subject. I used to fear being forgotten. I feared that the world would see only what I left undone, never what I imagined, that they would call me unfinished. But now I understand. No life is finished. We are not meant to be conclusions. We are questions with breath. I will leave behind many of those questions, some etched in diagrams, some floating in pigment, some buried in the half-turned gears of a lion that never roared, others, like these, hidden in the rhythm of confession. And perhaps, long after my bones return to the dust of Vinci or Amboise, or wherever I am laid, someone will open these pages, and they will not find answers, but they will find echoes, a smudge of ink where I pressed too hard, a line that breaks mid-thought, a spiral, a silence. That, I believe, is enough. Because memory does not need to be loud. It needs to be true. And this long night of whispering truths into still air has been the most honest creation of all. The candle bends lower, the wax pools, the pages are warm beneath my hand as if holding a final breath. I close the notebook, gently, not with sadness, but with release. She, Mona Lisa, still smiles, unseen in the dark behind me. The gears still rest, their teeth touching but unmoving. The brushes will never wake. But in this stillness, something stirs, not in the room, in you. That, I believe, is enough, because memory does not need to be loud. It needs to be true. And this long night of whispering truths into still air has been the most honest creation of all. The candle bends lower, the wax pools, the pages are warm beneath my hand as if holding a final breath. I close the notebook, gently, not with sadness, but with release. She, Mona Lisa, still smiles, unseen in the dark behind me. The gears still rest, their teeth touching but unmoving. The brushes will never wake. But in this stillness, something stirs, not in the room, in you.
If you have heard me, if you have lingered in this confession, if you have walked, even silently, through the corridors of my doubt, then I am not lost. Then I never was. And though I am finished speaking, the spiral continues. Not upward, not outward, but inward, forever. The candle has gone out now. Only the soft warmth of wax remains, its last breath lingering in the hush like the memory of a thought. The quill rests beside the parchment, no longer moving, yet still carrying the shape of what it once confessed. The studio breathes in silence. Dry brushes curl like sleeping feathers. The gears, once bright with hope, lie still. The spiral, my spiral, no longer turns. And yet, you are here, still listening, still with me. Breathe in the scent of aged parchment. Breathe out the weight of unspoken dreams. Around you, the world softens. The walls dissolve into pages. The ceiling lifts into sky. 1,000 sketches swirl, slow as ash in golden light. They do not ask to be understood. They only ask to be felt. Let the silence carry you. Let the whisper of ink draw you inward. Let your thoughts spiral gently, gently, gently. Here, in this stillness, Leonardo sleeps. Not forgotten, not unfinished, only at peace. And you, traveler of echoes, you carry his final lines in the quiet chamber of your breath. You do not need to remember every word, only the hush that followed them. Only the rhythm of thought, slowing. Only the warmth of the candle, fading. Only the last turn of the spiral, easing into stillness. Good night, time traveler. May your dreams carry the scent of oil and parchment, the weightless turn of wings that never flew, and the echo of a confession whispered into the silent paper of history. We have closed the notebook, but its pages will continue turning, slowly, softly, until morning.